So class of 2023, congratulations. You've done it. You've memorized obscure legal precedents. You've endured a frightening but exhilarating 1L year. You've weathered all-nighters at the Feynman and Pappas law libraries. And you even survived boat cruise and law prom. And you did it all in the midst of a pandemic, showing incredible heart and grit. And today, you enjoy your more than hard-earned place as alumni of Boston University School of Law. I could not be prouder of you. We couldn't be prouder of you. Many of you are joined here today by your loved ones, and to them, I want to say thank you. So let's give them a big round of applause. To the family and friends of today's graduates, in ways big and small, you have made a spectacular moment possible. And like it or not, you are now a part of our BU Law family. And it's a particularly exciting time to join our fold. This year, we celebrate our 150th anniversary. We welcomed our very first cohort of students before the invention of the telephone. That inaugural class had only 60 students and just one lecture hall. Back then, openly discriminatory policies were the norm at schools, but BU Law was a rare exception. Less than a decade after the Civil War and 50 years before women could cast a vote in this country, BU Law made the bold decision to admit highly accomplished students regardless of race, gender, or religion. Our very first class included an African-American student and an Asian student. The year was 1872, and only 2 years later, the first woman enrolled at BU Law. This founding commitment to justice and equality was astoundingly ahead of its time, and it is a key to our long and impressive legacy. The first African-American person to win a case before the US Supreme Court was a BU Law alum. So too was the first openly gay person to argue a case before the US Supreme Court. After 9/11, it was a BU Law alum who negotiated an $800 million settlement on behalf of first responders and their families, which was the culmination of a nearly 10-year legal battle. These are just a few of the flagship moments that make up our shared legacy at BU Law, the ones that have made the history books. As impressive as they do not capture the entirety of our story, because every day, our faculty, students, and alumni work tirelessly behind the scenes to save vulnerable persons from eviction, to thwart unjust deportations, to stop human rights indignities, to enable the compassionate release of elderly or dying prisoners, and so much more. Behind every big history-making milestone for our community is a cavalcade of small, seemingly unremarkable moments. And these moments are an important part of our legacy too. And the same is true for all of you. Today, you graduate from law school. Next, you will pass the bar. Maybe you will marry the love of your life and have children. These are the pop the champagne moments, the call your mama moments. They loom large in our consciousness, and they linger long in our memories. In a world where we are told to go big, or go home, or think big, it's tempting to trace the through line of our lives through these big moments alone. But as you begin your next chapter, don't lose sight of the smaller moments. The professor whose passion for the law was contagious. The mentor who paved the way to an unexpected opportunity. The chance encounter that changed how you think about an issue. These things may feel inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, but they are far more than the occasional major moments of triumph. They are what make you who you are. Certainly, this was true for me. When I think about the watershed moments in my own story, the ones that changed the course of my life, it is not the big celebratory moments that come to mind, but the ones that pass with little fanfare. Like when my second grade teacher in Texas, a white woman named Mrs. Sanford, set aside the pattern of highly racialized tracking at our racially diverse elementary school and placed me on the highest track, which then set me on that track, as it does for so many, for the rest of my primary and secondary education. My teacher did this at a time when Black children were almost always overlooked, reduced to stereotypes that cast us as less intelligent, a time when we were almost always, without thought, placed on the lowest track. But that teacher recognized my potential, and because she did, others, including my new classmates and teachers for years to come, had no choice but to recognize it too. Then there was that time during my sophomore year of high school, when my history teacher went out of her way to help me and another Black student by asking an African-American attorney from her church, a municipal finance attorney named Sherman Stimley, to hire us to work in his office over the summer. My classmate and I spent the summer filing papers, reading documents, and taking oral tests, not about the details of legal work, but instead about the Shakespeare plays that he would give us to read. I left that summer thinking, nope, the law is not for me. And to this day, I would be hard-pressed to explain what municipal finance law is. But when I finally decided to pursue law as a profession years later in college, I knew I could become a lawyer. And I knew it in part because I'd had the opportunity to work with and see a real possibility of my becoming a lawyer through Mr. Stimley. And of course, there was a time during law school when I was riding a Greyhound bus back from Ann Arbor to Iowa, and I was sitting next to the absolutely sweetest elderly African-American woman. And though we had just met, she was so full of pride when she heard that I was in law school. The idea of someone who looked like her going to law school had seemed unimaginable to her when she was growing up. And so she insisted on giving me $5. Of course, I tried to refuse, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. She did not have much money, but she wanted to help me fulfill the dreams that she and so many of her generation had fought for, but were denied. I held on to that $5 bill for a long time, and there were many days, hard days, when the thought of that bill and the look of pride on that kind elderly woman's face inspired me to keep going. These moments, which I now recognize as major turning points in my life, are easy to miss. But it's clear that they help put me on the path that I am on today. As you embark on your own careers, dream big, but also make sure to pay attention to the quiet moments. They are the wellspring of some of life's greatest opportunities, and not just for you, but for others as well. It may not always feel this way, but your law degree gives you tremendous power. Over the course of your career, you may find yourself in a position to create a small but seminal moment for someone else. You might offer some words of wisdom to a less experienced colleague. Give someone who is considering law school a few hours of your time. You might recommend someone who otherwise wouldn't get a second look for an internship that could turn into their first postgraduate job. These are not particularly grand gestures, but they are powerful, and they can be life-changing, especially for people who are far too frequently denied a fair shot at life. In fact, just as small moments can open up new possibilities, they can also work in the opposite direction. Many people at the margins arrive there not because of some tragic accident of fate, but because they've been beaten down by the steady accumulation of minor slights, systemic barriers, and polite refusals. And part of being an effective advocate is recognizing that the small things also matter. Because truth be told, most of us will deal primarily in small things. If you're very fortunate during your career, you might have the opportunity to work on a game-changing case or two, one that alters well-established legal doctrine and transforms the legal landscape. But more often than not, the work you will do will be more modest. It won't generate headlines or change the course of history, but it could change the course of someone's life. It could pull them back from the brink of economic collapse. It could prevent them from losing their home. It could keep their family together. Recognize this, and you will treat even your least glamorous cases with as much seriousness and reverence as you would your most high-profile one. And speaking of high profile, I know you're all eager to get to our main event, but before I wrap up, I want to tell you about one more small moment that helped change someone's life. But this moment isn't one of mine. It belongs to our next speaker. It's a moment that she says helped sustain her during one of the toughest periods of her life. She was a college student at Harvard University. We'll forgive her for that. And she was walking through Harvard Yard one day, feeling unsure of herself. Not only was she a first-year student from sunny Miami, forced to weather our long winters in Boston, but she was also one of a small minority of Black women enrolled at the university. She was a public school kid on a campus where many of her peers had gone to prep schools, and she was feeling out of place. In her own words, she wondered, do I belong here? Can I make it? As she was walking, she passed another Black woman, someone she did not know, and just as they were crossing, this kind stranger, who must have seen the anguish on her face, leaned over and said one word. She said, persevere. The young woman never learned who that stranger was, but that brief expression of solidarity gave her a desperately needed boost. Years later, she would recount the same exchange before a panel of senators just before they confirmed her as the first Black woman to serve as an Associate Justice on the Supreme Court of the United States.